Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas. Our ongoing study on the book of Mark. We're going to take a look at chapter 3, 1 through 4. We're going to look at a very important event of healing. What we look at here is an event of healing that Christ transforms into an event of judgment. It takes place on the Sabbath in the Capernaum synagogue, but Christ here displays his authority as Son of Man, judge over the living and the dead. So we get a prefigurement, we get a foretaste of Christ and the white throne judgment. Let's go to block 1 and take a look at the text. Another time Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal the man on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they, the religious leaders, remained silent. And we could add to that they remained silent because they remain guilty, because they are apathetic and not compassionate toward this man. They have distorted and completely destroyed the original meaning of the Sabbath. Now it becomes a time of oppression. Christ says, no, the Sabbath is a time of healing. It is a time of healing. It is not a time of oppression. The Sabbath is a time for rest and healing. Let's go to the Block 2 commentary. We're going to look at Ruckman and Edwards. We'll begin with Ruckman, and I thought Ruckman had a good point here. This event took place in the synagogue on the Sabbath. The religious leaders were motivated to accuse Christ. But Jesus uses the event of healing to test the hearts of the religious leaders. Take a look at Psalm 7 or Proverbs 17. Here's the key point. Christ's questioning of the religious leadership transformed the event into one of white throne judgment, or a foretaste of white throne judgment. I agree with that. We've already seen in previous lessons that Jesus declares himself to be the Son of Man who comes in judgment. He is the Son of Man judge of the prophecy of Daniel. So I agree that this event has been transformed from an event of healing into an event of judgment. Let's take a look at Edwards. In this event of healing, the religious leaders are motivated only to accuse. They are there to accuse. The Sabbath rule that was in question was an additional rule. It's not scripture-based. And it said, "They shall not straighten a deformed limb on the Sabbath." No straightening of a deformed limb was allowed on the Sabbath. Not scripture-based. That was something that was a man-made tradition that became an oppressive part of making the Sabbath the exact opposite of what it's supposed to be. So let's go back. Block 2, note 2C. Christ, however, shows that human need leads to a moral imperative. Jesus becomes anchored. He becomes distressed at the silence and the apathy of the religious leaders. That's from verse 5. We get the Greek word of solupeo. Solupeo, moved to grief. Christ is moved to grief by this apathy of the religious leaders. Because they are not compassionate. They are apathetic. They don't have compassion for this man. They'd rather adhere to these man-made rules than act out of compassion, act out of sacrificial love. Christ is grieved in his heart. Christ is disturbed. Christ is grieved as the judge, and they've been judged into guilt and silence. They have been judged into the guilt of silence. Let's go to the Greek in block 3. I'm looking at 3 and 4. They're the most important verses here. Verse 3, Kailegai ta anthropon, and he, Christ, says to the man, Igaire eis ta mesan, arise unto the midst of the synagogue. And then verse 4, Kailegai autois, and he says to them, the religious leaders, existing tois sabbasin, is it lawful on the Sabbath, agathon e poiese e kako poiese, to do good or to do evil? And here's their answer. Hoide esiopon, but they were silent, from siape, to be silent. They were silenced, the religious leaders were silenced into their own guilt. They were silenced into their own guilt. And that's what's going on here. We know that Christ is what? The one with exousia authority. And what does that mean? Christ acts out of the divine ousia essence. And where is the divine ousia essence ultimately going to be revealed? On the cross. It is on the cross where the veil is split. The cross of Christ will become and remains an apocalyptic unveiling. Apocalypsis in Greek means unveiling. The cross becomes apocalyptic event. There's 3 hours of darkness from 12 to 3 when Christ is crucified. The earth trembles. The veil is split from top to bottom. The cross of Christ is an apocalyptic event of unveiling, a full unveiling of the messianic identity of Christ. The centurion cries out, surely this man is the Son of God. Mark has a centurion saying this at the cross. The cross becomes apocalyptic event of unveiling. It is the appointed kairos time for this apocalyptic unveiling of the messianic identity of Christ. It's at the cross. It is at the cross where this apocalyptic unveiling takes place. And what it reminds us is this: Christ is a member of the ousia essence of the triune Godhead. He comes as the Daniel apocalyptic judge. Jesus says, I am Son of Man, come down from heaven. I am the Daniel, Son of Man, the Son of Man prophesied by Daniel, who is the judge at the right hand of the Father. And here we have Christ in judgment. Now, people might read this and think this is an event of healing. Well, it is an event of healing, no doubt about it. But what it really is, this is an event of a foretaste. I really agree with Ruckman this time. This is a foretaste of the white throne judgment. And who is the judge at the right hand of the Father? The Son of Man. What does Christ claim to be? He claims to be the Son of Man of Daniel's prophecy. So it's a very important section of Scripture because It is not only an event of healing, but it becomes a transformative event of a foretaste of white throne judgment. Why were the religious leaders there? They were there to become a member of Antichrist. Let's go to Edwards' block 2, note 2. In this event of healing, the religious leaders are motivated to accuse. They accuse because they've got this man-made rule: they shall not straighten a deformed limb on the Sabbath. That's not scripture-based. It is man-made. Christ, however, shows that human need leads to compassionate moral imperative. Period. The triune Godhead, the ousia essence of the triune Godhead, Christ shares that ousia essence, and he's motivated by compassion, by agape, sacrificial love. Jesus becomes distressed. Jesus becomes angered and distressed at the apathy of these religious leaders that can actually disconnect from this man's need for healing and compassion. The Sabbath is supposed to be a time of rest, a time of healing, a genuine, divinely appointed time of healing. Christ is that member of the ousia essence of the triune Godhead. Christ transforms the event into an event of white throne judgment. Christ can read the hearts of the religious leaders. He knows what's going on. They are there as members of the Antichrist, to accuse Christ, to seek to destroy Christ, to stone him if he disobeys this man-made rule of the Sabbath that is not scripture-based. Christ judges them. Christ judges them with a question of judgment. Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they, the religious leaders, remain guilty in silence. The religious leaders remain guilty in silence. And it's just a tremendous teaching. I love what John Mark did here, because he emphasizes the fact that this is not just an event of healing. That in itself would be profound. It'd be a tremendous lesson in itself. But John Mark writes what Simon Peter tells him, and Simon Peter tells him, no, this was an event of judgment. This was an event of healing, yes, but for Simon Peter, as he dictates this gospel to John Mark, for Simon Peter, no, this was an event of healing that became an event of divine judgment by Christ, the Son of Man. It became an event of apocalyptic unveiling of Jesus as Son of Man, divine judge out of the ousia, divine essence of the triune Godhead. And this is what we have here. The Sabbath was created for man, not man for the Sabbath. Remember our previous lesson. The Sabbath was to be a time of rest, a time of spiritual healing. And for Christ, that means an opportunity for physical healing as well. And he says, stand up in front of everyone. Come to the very center of the synagogue, because I'm going to overthrow this man-made rule and reveal that I am the Son of Man who comes to heal. I am the Son of Man who comes to judge. And he healed this man on the Sabbath in the very center of the synagogue in Capernaum, and he judged the religious leaders as guilty in their apathy, as guilty in their clinging to man-made rules instead of clinging to the compassionate revelation of Scripture. Christ becomes angered, grieved at the apathy of these religious leaders that have missed the entire significance that is called for here. A moral imperative is called for here. A moral imperative to heal. The moral imperative to bless. The Sabbath is to be a time of rest and healing. Very, very powerful. That's going to wrap up 3:1 through 4. We will continue in chapter 3 next lesson.